The air in the rehearsal room crackled with an energy that went beyond the lines of the play. It was the kind of electricity that makes the hairs on your arms stand on end. A silent hum of unspoken desires and simmering tensions. Professor Alastair Thorne, a man of 49 years, stood center stage, his presence commanding the space. He moved with a grace that belied his age, his voice resonating with authority and passion as he guided his students through a particularly challenging scene. His eyes, however, kept drifting back to one student in particular, a young woman named Isabella Rossi, whose beauty and talent seemed to illuminate the entire room. Their connection was undeniable, a silent dialogue spoken through shared glances and subtle gestures. It was a connection that would soon ignite a firestorm of jealousy, deception, and ultimately, deadly violence. Crestwood University, nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, was a place of intellectual pursuits and youthful ambition. The theater department, under Professor Thorne's guidance, was a jewel in the university's crown, renowned for its innovative productions and its impressive alumni network. Thorne, with his booming voice and infectious passion, was the department's heart and soul. He was known for his dedication, his long hours, and his unwavering belief in his students' potential. He was, by all outward appearances, a model professor, a pillar of the community. Alastair Thorne's life, however, was more complex than his public persona suggested. He was a man of considerable charm and charisma, a quality that served him well both on stage and in his personal life. He had been married twice before, each marriage ending in quiet, almost discreet, divorce. His first wife, Eleanor, a fellow academic, had reportedly found his intense focus on his career and his theatrical pursuits all-consuming, leaving little room for their relationship. His second marriage, to a much younger woman named Vivian, a former actress, had lasted only a few years, succumbing to the pressures of his demanding schedule and, some whispered, his wandering eye. He was currently married to Dr. Clara Thorne, a respected art historian at Crestwood, their relationship marked by a certain intellectual compatibility, though lacking, perhaps, the fire of his earlier passionate attachments. He had 2 children, a teenage son from his first marriage, and a young daughter from his second, both of whom he maintained a loving, if somewhat distant, relationship with. While no one ever explicitly accused Thorne of any wrongdoing, there were suspicions among some who knew him well, a sense that his personal life was not quite as perfect as he portrayed it. His interactions with students, while always professional on the surface, sometimes carried a certain intensity, a personal investment that made some uneasy. Isabella Rossi, a freshman with a radiant smile and a preternatural talent for acting, was Thorne's latest protégé. She was everything a drama professor could hope for, dedicated, driven, and brimming with potential. Isabella was drawn to Thorne's experience and the way he carried himself with such respect. His age, rather than being a deterrent, added to his allure. He was a man who had seen the world, who had achieved success, who exuded confidence and authority. He spoke to her about art, literature, and life with a passion that ignited her own intellectual curiosity. She felt seen by him, understood in a way that no one else had ever understood her. She craved his approval, his guidance, and the sense of belonging he fostered within the theater department. She was ambitious, eager to learn, and determined to make her mark on the stage, and she saw Thorne as the key to unlocking her potential. She admired his knowledge, his charisma, and the way he commanded the attention of everyone in the room. She found herself drawn to his maturity, his worldliness, and the subtle hints of vulnerability that he occasionally revealed. Thorne, in turn, saw in Isabella a reflection of his younger self, a raw talent waiting to be molded, a passion that mirrored his own. He took her under his wing, offering her extra coaching, casting her in lead roles, and showering her with praise. He was captivated by her beauty, her energy, and her unwavering dedication to her craft. He saw in her a spark of something special, a potential that he felt compelled to nurture. He enjoyed her company, their intellectual discussions, and the way she made him feel alive and relevant. He told himself that his interest in her was purely professional, that he was simply mentoring a promising young talent, but deep down, He knew that their connection went beyond the realm of teacher and student. Damien Vargas, Isabella's boyfriend of 2 years, was a different story. He was a brooding, intense young man, a junior majoring in English literature. He was deeply in love with Isabella, but his love was tinged with a possessiveness that bordered on obsession. He was constantly checking in on her, questioning her whereabouts, and scrutinizing her interactions with other people, especially men. He saw Professor Thorn as a rival, a threat to his relationship with Isabella. Damien was a complex character, a mix of intellectual curiosity and emotional vulnerability. He was passionate about literature, poetry, and art, but he struggled with social interactions and often felt awkward and insecure in social settings. He was deeply devoted to Isabella, seeing her as his muse, his inspiration, his other half. But his love was also fueled by a deep-seated fear of abandonment, a fear that stemmed from his own difficult childhood. His father had left when he was young, leaving his mother to raise him alone. This experience had left him with a deep sense of insecurity and a constant need for reassurance. The whispers started subtly, circulating in the hallowed halls of the theater building. Students noticed the extra time Isabella spent with Professor Thorn, the way he would linger a little too long after rehearsals, the almost paternal affection he displayed towards her. Some dismissed it as harmless mentorship, others saw something more, a connection that felt inappropriate. They observed the way Thorn's eyes followed Isabella across the room, the way he would touch her arm when giving her direction, the way their laughter seemed to linger in the air long after the joke had been told. They noticed the late-night rehearsals, the closed-door meetings in Thorn's office, the way Isabella's demeanor seemed to change when she was around him, becoming more confident, more radiant. They didn't have any concrete proof of an affair, but the atmosphere between them, the unspoken connection, was enough to fuel their suspicions. Isabella, caught between admiration for her professor and the possessive love of her boyfriend, began to weave a web of deceit. She reassured Damien that her relationship with Thorn was purely professional, but she also relished the attention and guidance she received from the professor. She told Damien that Thorn was demanding, even overbearing, painting him as a taskmaster who pushed her to her limits. She confided in Damien about the long hours, the intense rehearsals, and the professor's exacting standards, portraying herself as a victim of his rigorous mentorship. These lies, seemingly small at first, were like cracks in a dam, weakening the structure of their relationship and creating a fertile ground for suspicion and resentment. Isabella's lies were not born out of malice, but rather out of a desire to please both men in her life. She admired Thorn and wanted to continue learning from him, but she also loved Damien and didn't want to hurt him. She believed she could manage the situation, that she could keep the two relationships separate, but she underestimated the power of jealousy and the fragility of trust. Damien, already prone to jealousy, became increasingly suspicious. He started to see Thorn as a predator, a man taking advantage of Isabella's vulnerability. He imagined the professor's hands on her, his voice whispering in her ear, his influence corrupting her innocence. He obsessed over these thoughts, replaying them in his mind, fueling his anger and paranoia. He began to follow Isabella to her rehearsals, lurking in the shadows, watching their interactions, interpreting every gesture, every touch, every shared laugh as evidence of an affair. He started to collect information, snippets of gossip, overheard conversations, anything that could confirm his suspicions. He felt like he was losing control, like Isabella was slipping away from him, and he was desperate to reclaim her. Damien's paranoia was fueled by his own insecurities and his fear of being abandoned. He interpreted Isabella's desire to pursue her dreams as a rejection of him, a sign that she no longer needed him. He saw Thorn as a symbol of everything he lacked: confidence, success, and the ability to attract Isabella's attention. She denied everything, playing the victim, insisting that she was being harassed by the professor. Her denials, however, only served to inflame Damien's suspicions further. He felt betrayed, manipulated, and consumed by a rage that threatened to boil over. The university, oblivious to the gathering storm, continued its business as usual. No one in a position of authority noticed the increasing tension between the three individuals. No one intervened. No one suspected the tragedy that was about to unfold. The stage was set for a tragedy, a collision of passions, insecurities, and lies. The players were in place. The script was written in deception, and the final act was about to begin. The secret romance between Professor Thorn and Isabella Rossi was a slow burn, a gradual escalation of stolen glances, lingering touches, and whispered conversations in dimly lit hallways. It started with innocent admiration, a student's fascination with her charismatic professor, but it quickly blossomed into something more. They found themselves drawn to each other, their shared passion for theater igniting a spark that couldn't be denied. They began spending more and more time together, their meetings disguised as extra rehearsals, late-night discussions about character motivation, or impromptu coffee breaks in quiet corners of the campus. Thorn's office, with its shelves overflowing with books and its walls adorned with theatrical posters, became their sanctuary, a place where they could let their guard down and explore the depths of their connection. Isabella was intoxicated by Thorn's attention, his intellect, and the way he made her feel seen and understood. She found herself confiding in him, sharing her dreams, her fears, and her vulnerabilities. She felt a sense of safety and acceptance in his presence, a feeling she had never experienced with anyone else, not even Damien. Thorn, in turn, was drawn to Isabella's youthful energy, her passion, and her unwavering belief in him. He saw in her a reflection of his younger self, a reminder of the dreams and ambitions he had once held. He found himself looking forward to their meetings, their conversations, and the way she made him feel alive and relevant. Their relationship, however, was a dangerous game, a tightrope walk between forbidden desire and the potential for devastating consequences. They both knew that their affair, if exposed, could ruin their careers, their reputations, and their lives. They tried to be careful to keep their meetings secret, but their passion was a wildfire, threatening to consume them both. Meanwhile, Damien's suspicions continued to grow. He noticed the way Isabella would light up when she talked about Professor Thorn, the way she would linger after rehearsals, the way her phone would buzz with late-night messages. He started to follow her, tracking her movements, eavesdropping on her conversations, and searching for any evidence that could confirm his fears. He became increasingly agitated, his jealousy morphing into a consuming obsession. He felt like he was losing Isabella, that she was slipping away from him, and he was desperate to reclaim her. One evening, as Isabella was leaving Thorn's office after a particularly intense rehearsal, Damien confronted her. He accused her of lying, of having an affair with the professor. Isabella denied everything, but Damien didn't believe her. He saw the guilt in her eyes, the way she avoided his gaze, the way her voice trembled when she spoke. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and consumed by a rage that threatened to explode. Isabella had mentioned to Damien that she was feeling overwhelmed and needed a break, a weekend away to clear her head. She suggested a trip to a spa resort in a nearby city, a chance to relax and rejuvenate before the pressures of finals and the upcoming theater production. Damien, though still suspicious, reluctantly agreed. He wanted to trust Isabella, to believe her denials, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing, feeding on his insecurities. Unbeknownst to Damien, Isabella's spa retreat was actually a romantic getaway with Professor Thorn. The weekend trip was not about relaxation, but a clandestine rendezvous, a chance for them to escape the watchful eyes of the campus and indulge in their forbidden passion. Before Isabella left for her trip, Damien, in a fit of paranoia, secretly slipped an AirTag into her bag. It was a small, innocuous-looking device, easily overlooked amongst her belongings, but it would prove to be a fateful decision. They drove for several hours, eventually arriving at a bustling city. They checked into a luxurious hotel, their room a spacious suite with a king-size bed, a jacuzzi, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Isabella was nervous, excited, and conflicted. She knew that what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't resist the pull of her attraction to Thorn. Thorn, on the other hand, was confident, almost arrogant. He believed that he could control the situation, that he could keep his affair with Isabella secret, that he could have his cake and eat it too. Damien, meanwhile, was consumed by a growing unease. Something felt off about Isabella's trip. Her explanations were vague, her demeanor distant. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from him. He tried to reach her several times over the weekend, but she didn't answer her phone. His anxiety escalated, his imagination conjuring images of Isabella and Thorn together, their intimacy a dagger twisting in his gut. Driven by a desperate need to know the truth, Damien used the AirTag to track Isabella's location. The signal led him to a high-end hotel in the heart of the city. His blood ran cold. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his worst fears were true. He took a bus to the city, his mind racing with dark thoughts. He had a plan, a desperate, reckless plan fueled by the fire of betrayal. He arrived at the hotel late in the evening, his appearance disheveled, his eyes filled with a manic energy. He had a gun tucked into his waistband, a .38 special revolver that he had inherited from his grandfather. He had never used it before, but he knew how to. He had been practicing at a shooting range for weeks, the cold metal a familiar weight against his skin, a dark promise taking shape in his mind. He slipped past the hotel security, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind consumed by a single-minded purpose. He found their room number using the AirTag, and with a trembling hand, he knocked on the door. Isabella opened the door, her face a mixture of surprise and fear when she saw Damien standing there, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Thorn, who was sitting on the couch, rose to his feet, his expression a mix of confusion and annoyance. Before either of them could speak, Damien burst into the room, his rage a tangible force. "You took her from me," he screamed, his voice raw with pain and fury. "You stole her away from me." Isabella pleaded with Damien to calm down, to listen to her, but he wasn't listening. He was consumed by jealousy, his mind clouded by betrayal. He pulled out the gun, pointing it at Thorn. Thorn's eyes widened in shock, his confident demeanor crumbling in the face of Damien's raw desperation. He tried to speak, to reason with Damien, but the words caught in his throat. Damien fired 3 shots, the sound deafening in the confined space of the hotel room. Thorn slumped to the floor, his blood staining the plush carpet. Isabella screamed, her voice filled with terror and despair. Damien stood over Thorn's body, the gun still smoking in his hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, sadness, and regret. "I loved you," he whispered, his voice barely audible, directed at Isabella, who was cowering in fear. "I loved you more than anything." Then he turned and fled the room, leaving Isabella alone with the body of her lover, the man who had ignited her passion and ultimately led to her destruction. The investigation into the tragic death of Professor Alastair Thorn at the Grandview Hotel sent shockwaves through the quiet city and the tranquil campus of Crestwood University. Detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together the events that led to the fatal shooting. Their efforts focused on unraveling the complex web of motives and the roles played by each individual in this tragic drama. The motive, at first glance, seemed straightforward: a jealous boyfriend consumed by rage. However, as the investigation progressed, a more nuanced picture emerged. Damien Vargas, the shooter, was revealed to be a young man grappling with deep-seated insecurities and a history of emotional instability. His childhood, marked by the abandonment of his father, had left him with a profound fear of rejection and a desperate need for control in his relationships. Isabella's growing independence and her close relationship with Professor Thorn had triggered these deep-seated fears, fueling his paranoia and ultimately driving him to a desperate act of violence. Expert analysis from psychologists and criminologists shed light on Damien's state of mind. They pointed to his obsessive tendencies, his difficulty managing his emotions, and his distorted perception of reality. They argued that his actions were not simply a crime of passion, but rather the culmination of a long-simmering emotional turmoil that had finally boiled over. Isabella Rossi's role in the tragedy was also scrutinized. Her initial portrayal as a naive victim of a manipulative professor began to unravel as investigators delved deeper into her relationship with Thorne. It became clear that Isabella was not merely a passive participant in the affair. She was an ambitious young woman, eager for recognition and success, and she saw Thorne as a means to achieve her goals. She had willingly engaged in the relationship, drawn to his power, his intellect, and the validation he offered. Her lies to Damien, while initially intended to protect herself and maintain both relationships, had ultimately fueled his jealousy and contributed to the tragic outcome. Professor Thorne's role in the tragedy was perhaps the most controversial. As a respected professor and mentor, he had a responsibility to maintain professional boundaries with his students. His relationship with Isabella, while seemingly consensual, was a clear violation of those boundaries. He had abused his position of power, exploiting Isabella's vulnerability and ambition for his own gratification. His actions were not only unethical but also illegal, as they constituted sexual misconduct with a minor. The aftermath of the shooting was a time of profound grief, anger, and soul-searching for the Crestwood community. The college, once a haven of intellectual pursuits and youthful dreams, was now shrouded in a cloud of sadness and disbelief. Students, faculty, and administrators struggled to come to terms with the tragedy, their sense of safety and security shattered. The college administration responded to the crisis by implementing a series of measures aimed at preventing similar incidents in the future. They strengthened campus security, revised policies regarding student-teacher relationships, and increased mental health resources for students and faculty. They also initiated a campus-wide dialogue about the issues of sexual misconduct, power dynamics, and the importance of creating a safe and supportive learning environment. The legal proceedings against Damien Vargas were complex and emotionally charged. He was charged with murder, but his defense team argued that his actions were the result of diminished capacity due to his mental health issues. The trial, which lasted for weeks, was a media spectacle, with reporters and cameras crowding the courtroom, eager to capture every detail of the unfolding drama. In the end, the jury found Damien guilty of manslaughter, a lesser charge that acknowledged his mental state at the time of the crime. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, his life irrevocably destroyed by his actions. The impact on Professor Thorne's family was devastating. His wife, Clara, was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, grappling with the betrayal of her husband and the public humiliation of his affair. His children, already struggling with the complexities of their relationships with their father, were now forced to confront the dark side of his legacy. They mourned the loss of the man they thought they knew, while also grappling with the knowledge of his infidelity and the tragic consequences of his actions. The story of Alistair Thorne, Isabella Rossi, and Damien Vargas is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the destructive power of unchecked passions, the fragility of trust, and the devastating consequences of violating boundaries. It is a story that continues to resonate within the Crestwood community, prompting ongoing discussions about responsibility, ethics, and the importance of creating a culture of respect and safety on college campuses. Now, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this complex case? Do you think justice was served? How can we prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future? Share your insights and perspectives in the comments below. Let's engage in a meaningful conversation and learn from this tragic event. And if you found this video compelling and informative, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know about our latest deep dives into true crime stories that explore the dark side of human nature and the complexities of the justice system. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our future investigations. Thank you for watching, and remember, every like, share, and comment helps us continue to bring you these important stories.